Today, chocolate is known as one of the sweetest, most decadent things you can feast upon. Even just the word chocolate can make your mouth water. Some people view chocolate as a quick happiness or confidence boost, except it has been proven to be a cure for coughs and anxiety and even help prevent cancer. Making chocolate used to be a strenuous, tedious project that resulted in a spicy, bitter drink. In modern times, we can make a sweet that everybody loves at a fraction of the time. The history of chocolate goes back 13.7 billion years ago, all the way to the Big Bang. Without the Big Bang, nothing today would exist, let alone chocolate. 200 million years after the Big Bang, the universe began to become more complex. The temperature began to rise, which generated energy and formed stars. When those stars died, chemical elements were produced, and the formation of chocolate truly began. Chocolate is an organic material, so it is made up of many elements, including carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, and traces of elements such as iron, calcium, magnesium, and nitrogen. These are all essential ingredients in chocolate. Soon, after the stars were formed and they began to produce elements, our solar system, including the Earth, began to form. Then, about 1,300 million years ago, the first fungi formed on Earth, and 600 years later, the first evolved plants have grown, including Theobroma cacao, which literally translates into the food of the gods, which we call the cacao tree. Theobromine, C7H8N4O2, is a bitter alkaloid of the cacao plant. The plant that manifests it originated in the upper Amazon of Colombia and was brought to Central America, where it was then harvested by humans. It was first domesticated solely for the edible pulp around the beans. Cacao trees were domesticated in modern-day Peru and Brazil, which have the perfect credentials for growing cacao. The cacao tree has very strict Goldilocks conditions. It must be grown in the 20-20 zone, the humid area 20 degrees north and south of the equator, between 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or 15 to 27 degrees Celsius, and in the shade. The tree is pretty small, only about 13 to 26 feet tall, and takes 5 full years to bloom. The cacao fruits grow in clusters near the trunk and contain 20 to 60 beans, which are embedded in a white pulp, which is very sweet. It grows under such strict conditions because it is so susceptible to disease, such as pod rot. If it is too cold and too humid, a fungus called Phytophthora will infect the cacao pods and ruin the entire plant. Later, humans moved to Central America, and in 600 AD, the Maya began to harvest the cacao tree from the rainforest. Workers had to harvest the pods and remove the beans by cracking the tough shell with either brute strength or help from animals. The beans were fermented for about a week and then dried by the hot Central American sun. Drying could take up to 2 whole weeks. The Mayans then ground the dried bean, much like what we do with coffee beans today. The beans were roasted and then combined with milk and spices to create a drink used to treat coughs and fever, which was also the first form of chocolate. The Mayans introduced it to the Aztec, who named it chocolatl, an Aztec word meaning bitter water. Chocolatl was very astringent and spicy and considered a luxury drink. The Aztec also cultivated a similar plant, Theobroma bicolor, or the mocambo tree, for production of chocolatl, except the original cacao plant was much more popular. The drink became so popular in Central America that the beans were used as currency, and many rainforests were cleared to create the earliest known cacao plantations. Soon, with collective learning, chocolatl began to spread like a wildfire. Christopher Columbus was the first European to come in contact with the bean. In August 1502, Columbus stole a canoe filled with luxury goods, including cocoa beans, which he brought back to Europe. In the 16th century, the Spanish invaded Central America. Don Cortez was given cocoa beans and taught how to make chocolatl, beginning the spread of chocolate to Spain. The Spaniards thought that the mocambo tree was of lower quality than the cacao tree, so many stopped using the plant to make chocolatl. 20 years later, Cortez returned to Central America, defeated the leader, and brought back chocolatl-making equipment and more cocoa beans to Spain. He hid the equipment in Spanish monasteries so only the rich could enjoy the drink. Although chocolatl was still incredibly bitter, it became increasingly popular within the wealthy. It took a century for the secret to spread across Europe and the rest of the world after Spain declined in national strength and global influence. By 1606, chocolatl had spread out through France, Britain, Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and Italy, and several groups had even established their own cocoa plantations. The drink had become much sweeter than the original Mayan version. The court of King Charles V adopted the drink, and it was given the name chocolate. But it was still consumed as a liquid as opposed to the solid dessert we enjoy today. King Louis VII of France's wife adored chocolate so much that it was declared the official drink of the French court, and a few years later, a Frenchman opened the very first chocolate house, the Coffee Mill and Tobacco Run, in London, and the drink became a bestseller. Hans Sloane, the president of the Royal College of Physicians, visited Jamaica and tried chocolate, but considered it to be nauseous. He mixed the drink with milk and discovered it to be much more enjoyable. After returning to England, he shared the recipe, and milk chocolate was born. By the 1700s, there were flourishing chocolate houses everywhere. Chocolate was still pretty expensive, about 75 cents a pound, which is equal to around $400 today, and considered something only the upper-class members could enjoy. Then, in 1828 in Amsterdam, chemist Conrad Johannes van Houten completely changed the chocolate-making industry. He developed a press that separated cocoa butter from the cocoa beans, which left behind a dry residue that could be crushed into powder, much like the instant cocoa or cocoa powder that we use today. It was stirred into milk and water to produce a similar, yet much simpler, form of the drink. From the newly discovered cocoa powder, something new sprung forth, a solid, sweeter form of the beloved drink. By using less cocoa butter and more cocoa powder, the treat could be pressed into a block, and the term chocolate began to mean solid chocolate rather than the drink. A decade after the press was invented, J.S. Fry & Sons produced the first chocolate bar. These bars were gritty and powdery and not very popular. Many Quakers who alienated themselves from mainstream professions began to support themselves by investing in cocoa production. A Quaker by the name of John Cadbury founded Cadbury Limited, which was a one-man business when it opened, and flourished into a full-grown grocery shop specializing in cocoa, starting the Cadbury business that we know today. In 1866, there was a turning point for the company when Van Houten's press spread to America, and the Cadbury business, along with many other Quaker chocolate companies of that time, were finally able to make solid chocolate. Soon, after Van Houten's revolutionary press was invented, a new chocolatier changed the chocolate world again in 1879. This miraculous man was Rodolphe Lindt, the founder of the Lindt Chocolate Factory. He invented a machine called the conch that evenly distributed cocoa butter within melted chocolate. It is said that Lindt accidentally left a chocolate mixer running overnight, which made the gritty chocolate much smoother and more flavorful, rapidly increasing the popularity of solid chocolate. At World's Fair in Chicago in 1893, a chocolate machine was displayed. Milton S. Hershey, a caramel maker, was very intrigued by the machine. He had already made a fortune from making caramel, so Hershey set up chocolate-making machinery in his factory in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and began to massively produce chocolate candy bars. Soon, bakers and chocolatiers everywhere were transfixed by the new bars and began to add in new things to the candy bars, starting the extreme improvement of the candy bar industry. It was World War I and the European doughboys that truly helped chocolate become so popular. Chocolate manufacturers were forced to ship blocks of chocolate to military bases where they were distributed to the doughboys. And, by the end of the war, the soldiers had grown to love chocolate, which made the civilians want it as well. More and more candy bar manufacturers were popping up, and around 40,000 different types of chocolate bars were produced. After Milton S. Hershey began the chocolate boom in Lancaster, it soon spread to New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and later the Midwest because the sugar, corn syrup, and milk used to make the chocolate were so readily available. Today, there are over 200 chocolate companies worldwide and 500 different varieties of the treat. The average person eats 12 pounds of chocolate a year. The modern chocolate bar is still pretty natural, made of chocolate liqueur, which is fermented in roasted ground cocoa beans, cocoa butter, sugar, and an emulsifier that helps the ingredients blend together. Surprisingly, vanilla is also added. Milk is also added in for milk chocolate. The cocoa beans we use today are much more different than the beans the Maya used. In fact, only about 10% of the chocolate produced is made from those beans. 80% of the chocolate is made from the Forastero beans, which are much cheaper. A hybrid between the original Maya beans and the Forastero beans is used in another 10%. There's more than just the delicious taste that draws us to chocolate. Chocolate is made up of chemicals that can trigger your mood by releasing neurotransmitters into your brain. Theobromine is a weak stimulant, but withdrawal from the chemical can cause migraines. Tryptophan is also found in chocolate, produce serotonin to make us feel relaxed and satisfied. These chemicals can make us feel like we need chocolate and develop a slight physiological addiction to the treat. Psychological addictions are highly influenced by cultural forces. Chocolate is somewhat of a forbidden fruit in American culture, so many people crave it more than they would if it was not viewed as sinful because of all the fat and calories packed into the bar. The future of our chocolate supply is uncertain. The head of the United Kingdom's Food and Drink Federation has estimated that in less than 7 years, the demand for chocolate will be so high that we will need more than 1 million tons of beans to fulfill the desire. Soon enough, the demand will overcome supply. Many famous chocolate companies have been expressing concern for the dwindling supply of cocoa trees. Climate change, deforestation, and disease are all overwhelming the organism. Scientists are starting to believe that the answer to this issue will be sequencing the cacao genome, which will open up our understanding of the plant, helping it grow faster and live longer. In any case, humans have always gone to great troubles to ensure their chocolate supply. Doubtless, future generations will spare no effort to continue to do the same.